Yeah, well, you haven't read it before, so
I've never read it. I never seen the movies before either.
I didn't have time to watch the movie.
I was like, when all this came down, like when this was like a popular thing, I was just, it was cool to not to like reject it entirely without reading or watching any of it. So that's what I did in like 2007 or whatever, 2008, when this Twilight badness was taking the world by storm. I
I
was
know.
like, no, I'm not into that.
Oh, I'm so into that.
Yeah, I'm still not into it, but at least I read it and watched it this time.
I did feel a little embarrassed.
Reading it
Yeah, but not very much because I was like 17
this time or last time.
when I was 17.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
I may say the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
Ooh. All right, you ready for this?
I mean, I was born ready for this.
All right, this is Heavy Board, episode 15. I'm Andrew Whitsett,
I'm Sophie Weiner,
and today we're doing Twilight by Stephenie Meyer.
and I am thrilled.
Sophie's thrilled, although she doesn't seem like it.
I mean, it's so well. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Fucking Twilight, dude.
What a thrill!
Yeah. And this is another one of those books, listeners. If you really need us to introduce this, I mean, everybody knows what this is.
Twilight,
Yeah, everybody knows. It's like us trying to
hit.
introduce.
the hit vampire teen romance of the what would we say? When was this? Like 2008?
Originally published in 2005, the first
Okay.
book, and then I think, the series started rocking, and the movie
Yeah, it-
was released in 2008.
Yeah, it was getting really hot probably towards the end of my time in high school.
Yeah, it was peak high school for us. I noticed that watching the movie last night. I was like, the outfits. It was peak.
But I don't think I read it until right as I was graduating when I was 17, which maybe makes that worse. That's embarrassing.
It was peak 2008, dude. 2007, like when the movie, like all the
Yeah, when
outfits.
it became a phenomenon is when I got on board.
Yeah.
I hopped on that bandwagon.
Yeah. So I mean, a pretty big cultural touchstone with Twilight. I guess, do we have the same version of this? Mine might be a newer printing, but it's I have the little brown paperback.
Yeah, I think is it
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a newer printing, I think.
Yeah, that's the one with the, pale hands holding an apple.
Yeah. I don't really understand that. Like, what is the significance of that image?
There's probably some innocence coded into this, I'm sure. Are the hands Edward and the apple is Bella?
Huh.
There are lots of ways we could take this, I'm sure. I
So-
don't feel like we care whether Stephenie Meyer picked her cover. But I'm sure it was effective. It's black cover. Lots of good contrast, going on.
So usually the writer has no control
Yeah.
over the cover, so his marketing department.
Yeah. Well, they did good.
So we
Yeah,
both
so-
have this little brown one. I have a newer printing.
I guess it's one of a trilogy of, or not trilogy, I guess it's
It's
saga.
it's 4 books, so a quartet of books, but then there's like 2 other ones that are like associated with it.
Well, I read the 4, I think, though I don't remember.
Yeah, and the movies, they just made the original 4, like the quartet of
I think I tried to watch the second movie at one point and kind of wanted to leave.
They're all on Hulu right now, listeners, if you want to go watch them.
I remember thinking the first one was bad and the second one was worse.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say any of them are good. I watched the movie last night before we did this, and as I was taking notes, I was like, man, this movie is way better than the book I just read.
Yeah.
That's how I
It's
felt.
just a throbbing, pulsing teen vampire romance absent of sex.
Yeah, because Meyer's a Mormon or whatever.
I mean, who knows, you
No, I
know?
mean, she is. Like, she
But
was like a Mormon housewife or something and
yeah,
like
but I
wrote
mean, who
this.
knows if that's why? Like maybe.
I mean, that's
I
definitely
mean,
why
I'd
there's no
hate to
sex.
spoil the rest of the series for you.
I mean, yeah, I guess we'll do this. We'll finish the series.
I can't not now that I've started. I think it's begun, and I went and found the second book at my parents' house today, so it's not a big deal. Yeah, so these books, we can say, you know, for each in the series, it's probably about what? How much?
I mean, pages or
Yeah, it's about 500 pages. That's probably about average for all of the books.
I think Breaking Dawn is the biggest one, and that's like double the size. Like it's like 800 or 1,000.
Does your copy have a preface of the next book in the back?
No.
I just realized that. I have a feeling I knew that when I was first reading it, but
No, just the epilogue and then it ends.
yeah, okay. So I definitely have a much. I mean, maybe this was like before. I don't know when New Moon came out. New Moon is the second book.
Well, I think if you said you got into it right when the movies came out, that was probably when they did these big reprintings to like sell the big series
Yeah.
along with the
It was,
movie marketing. So it
yeah, it
makes
was right
sense.
before the movie came out. It
Right,
was like the year before the movie came out.
right. So they're like making that.
And I was like, oh my God, Robert Pattinson.
Everybody in the movie is well, at least Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, like they're hot. But
Kristen Stewart seemed a weird choice to me in a way.
yeah. The thing is, we'll get to this eventually in this conversation. Yeah, I have a thing for Kristen Stewart. But yeah,
I
Kristen
have a thing
Stewart's
about her. She does this thing where I feel like she's acting with her jaw. Keira Knightley does it too.
well, she has a striking jaw.
And maybe that's just it. Maybe I have a problem with striking female jaws.
Yeah, I have a thing for Kristen Stewart. So yeah, Kristen Stewart's incredibly hot, and then like, I think she's even hotter now that she's older too. So like, she's a little young in like the Twilight, at least the first movie. I think she's only like 18 or 19 when they filmed that. Same with Robert Pattinson. I think he was only like 18 or 19, like when they started, if not younger.
Yeah, what a strange book.
Although I was looking it up, like I was pretty sure. I was like, did Kristen Stewart get a nose job? She must have at some
I don't
point.
keep tabs.
She must have at some point because uh, her nose looks much smaller now than it did in like these first Twilight, these like first Twilight movies. I was watching her at like 18, 19. But yeah, so that works. All right, we covered that. We covered the publisher. We have the same edition, so page numbers will match up more or less. Here, maybe a little different. We talked about Little Brown and Company. Published this 2005, 2006 was the paperback printing. So we have. All right, let's just go into it. Thoughts, initial thoughts.
Wow, wow, wow. This book has everything except for most of a plot and sex. And in my 17-year-old brain, that was perfect. It's like the characters are empty. I can just plaster my face on top of them and voila. Teenage girl fantasyland. Perfect for that. It's a really bad book. Taps into the low self-esteem female psyche at age 16, 17 very, very well. Not in any way that I think is like necessarily positive.
Are you saying that it's a bad book that you can't help but like, kind of thing?
Oh,
or...
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like there were parts where I was like, ugh, like this is so fucking bad and annoying and I can't stand it. But at no point was I as at no point did I hate it the way I hated The Quick and the Dead.
Right.
Like I had to finish it. But it's also like giant print on, it's giant print where like it's just two people sort of flirting for like most of 500 pages in like a really fucked up way, by the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
It's kind of not double spaced, but it's like half spaced.
And the print's big.
Yeah, the print is big, and it's also spaced out more than your average novel. So it's like kind of like I said, not double spaced, but like a half.
It's a big book for teens.
Yeah, so if this was printed normally and not with huge type and like spacing in between the lines, it would probably be like a 250-page book. But because they print it like this, it's 500.
It takes so little like brain power to read it,
Oh yeah.
There's nothing to like really interpret. You're not like ever really confused about what's happening. There's no complicated syntax or language.
Yeah. My thoughts, I didn't like it. I was texting Sophie about this all week where I was getting so frustrated. Basically because the first 300 pages of the novel are filler. Apart,
yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, apart
it's a bad
from...
book.
You get a few moments that's setting up. You can tell that she's never written anything before or since, really, with this, right? Like, she was not a trained writer. It's amateurish. All the things you expect in kind of pop novels. And, I don't want to beat up a pop novel for things like that. But usually I can, I texted Sophie this, I can forgive a pop novel for that if the story supersedes all else. Like, if it's just the story, like... We talked about this on the King episode. Like when it just starts clicking and the story is like, okay, next, what happens next, kind of thing. You can forgive.
Yeah, they say
clunkiness
most of the story. It seems for like the last, 200 pages max.
Shit, dude, at page like 380 is when I think it starts to actually hit, and that's after during like the baseball game.
Yeah, so the way things happen in this book is stupid. And when the first thing that happens in this book happened in this book, I was like, what? It's so goofy to me. And maybe it's the less goofy thing that happens. But basically, the plot up to this point is like, there's this girl, Bella, conveniently, she's called Bella Swan. She's like an ugly duckling, but actually she's a swan.
Very clever.
Yeah, I know.
Very clever.
So clever. Lived in Arizona with her mom, but for some reason has decided to exile herself to Forks, Washington, where her dad lives, which is the first thing that doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, didn't you have friends? Like,
well, what they do in the plot, like, they do explain this a little bit in the plot. It's not very well explained, but it's like, they kind of keep hinting at it the whole time, is that her mother's new husband is minor league ball player and,
or coach or something.
Doesn't know when he's going to get, where he's going to end up. They got transferred to some city because he got traded or something, and then...
Yeah.
She didn't want to come, or it was just only temporary for like a couple months, so they didn't want to take her, so they sent her to Forks, and whatever, for whatever reason, she ends up in this small town in Washington.
They really make it seem like it's her decision.
Yeah, and I mean, it is kind of,
to
right?
Go. The thing that I'm just like, didn't you have, like, do you not, the thing that was hard for me to believe as this character was like, you left this place where you've lived your whole life. Or most of your life. You're not leaving like any friends behind, or you don't have people you're thinking about.
Yeah,
I guess we just don't get into it and whatever.
And that's that's the thing too, is I don't care about so much stuff like that, particularly in pop novels like this. Whatever, let's roll. Let's just kind of go with the story. My problem with this was that there was no story. There was like, I kept getting frustrated reading this, because if if I didn't have to read this, like if we weren't doing an episode on this, I was texting Sophie, I probably would have stopped reading 150 pages in, which if you listen to this show, you know is my rule of thumb. I'll give every book 150 pages, and if you still haven't gotten me by then, I'll probably stop reading it. But since we were doing an episode on this, I just forced through it, and that was a brutal 200 pages before we got to that fucking baseball game.
It gets so boring.
Yeah. And it's not even that, like, you know, it's not like I wanted it to be this really graphic kind of like raw premarital sex. Like, I didn't think that needed to happen.
But things needed to happen.
Yeah,
we
but
needed some
something.
vampire shit to happen, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there's this whole... So, here's what happens in most of the novel. They end up somewhere in the same place together because, I don't know, Edward's coming to save her from some unforeseeable, you know, bad thing. And they sit and they talk for a while.
Yeah, that's pretty much the entire thing. Yeah, they talk. It's like awkward teen flirting for like 300
It's like
pages.
awkward teen flirting with someone who is like, with a character who feels like he's more like 25.
Well, I guess technically he's supposed to be like 90, right?
Yeah.
He's only pretending to be 17. Or I guess that's supposed to be part of it too, the conflict between being like 90 but also like forever living as a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's a lot of it. It's like this weird, almost like a love at first sight thing. Or that's sort of the vibe they give. Because it's like every time they talk, it just seems like an unreal kind of we're instantly in love with each other kind of talking. I don't know. It was strange. But the big thing that happens is ultimately Edward saves her from getting smashed by a fellow student's car at school. And she was like, he moved too quickly. He was able to lift this car off of me. And it like all happens in like a split second. And that's the thing that sets us off on this whole thing about what the fuck is going on with Edward, even though we as the readers already know that he's going to be a vampire.
Yeah. And that's too, like, you can kind of see the amateur writing because that first moment of action is him saving her from the car crash. And then, like, that's where we're like, okay, something's going on here because this is the first unusual thing that we get, like, actual scene of. And then that's in chapter 3. And then we get, like, 10 chapters of just awkward teen flirting, and it was so hard for me to read. And we're going to get into this. I have a few questions about like being a man reading this and then being a woman reading this, and then of course being a teenager is a little different too, like, so reading that. And I'm interested to see that because Sophie kept marking all these things that she saw as like references to sex, and I was just like, wait a minute, what?
Well, it's just hard not to read the dialogue between two people that are like heavily implying their attraction to one another and like stating that they love each other, and then having one of them be like, wow, that's a big Jeep you got. I'm like, yeah, you mean dick. It's big dick you got. And I was just crossing out words and putting dick or cock.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Damn.
Like, there are so many moments of like Edward walking into a room from the rain and his hair was dripping wet, you know.
Wet
and
is
there's more than
sexy.
one instance of that.
Wet is
But
sexy.
yeah, there's a lot of these moments that I don't know. I started labeling things as either like good hot or bad hot because there's a lot of bad hot in here.
Hot or not, here we go.
Like, there are some really cringy moments where, like, Edward will do something that we're supposed to think is, like, sweet and, like, loving and charming, and it made me cringe.
I will say Edward is much more likable in the movies with like Robert Pattinson and all his charisma and good looks and like charm behind it than he is in the book, where he's kind of like this angry, irrationally angry, like dead, like person. And I get that he's a vampire, he's supposed to be like dead, but like, yeah, like Robert Pattinson breathed a lot of life into that character. It would not have been as good if they didn't cast him well. But the first thing you open up on in this whole thing, I want to talk to you about this. You know, you get the dedication, you get the contents, all the usual stuff you get in the novel. But then there's this quote from Genesis 2:17. So those of you that know your Bible, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. I guess that's the significance of the apple. Forbidden fruit kind of metaphor. And I was just like, all right, so why is this the thing that she's starting the whole thing off with?
Oh my god. Well, like, this whole thing is like, they
Besides her being
refer
a
to
member of
him
the
as
Church
the
of...
lion falling in love with the lamb at one point. And they
Right.
make a joke about it.
Yeah. Besides her being an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, maybe, yeah, I guess the forbidden fruit metaphor is what she was trying to go for. Hence the apple with the pale hands on the cover.
Yeah, she wants what she can't have.
Eat this forbidden fruit.
So does he. And
Eat-
that's like the whole tension.
Eat
and the
this
whole
forbidden
time is-
fruit. You
It's
naughty boy.
The whole time it's just like, I love you, but you should want to leave me.
Yeah.
I'm dangerous.
I hate myself. I'm a monster, but also, I'm not really. Yeah, the danger factor. And I guess right after these movies hit was True Blood. We should
Yeah.
read those books too. We should put that on the list. It's
Okay,
like,
but also at no point did I believe like he's gonna fucking eat her. Like there's a
Right.
danger here. And that's the problem. Like at no point does anyone think like, yeah,
right, the danger, the
he
risk.
might fuck her up.
Yeah. The movie honestly does it better than the book does. I'm thinking specifically of that scene in the bedroom that the movie significantly shortens because it's ridiculously long in the book, where they're kind of talking in Belle's bedroom and then, or Bella's bedroom. Sorry, getting my fantasy stories mixed up here. And they just kind of vigorously make out. It's honestly more vigorously like kind of hot, like we want to fuck
Yeah,
each
no,
other,
this
make
is
out than
like-
anything in the book. And then he kind of stops and is like, oh, it's too much. And like kind of runs away real quick because he thinks he's, and I was like, all right, well, that worked better than any scene in the book to
Yeah,
show
it's
us that he's
hard.
very struggling, very hard not to eat her.
Yeah, it never seems like he's actually struggling.
Right.
It's just like he stops,
Right.
you know? Like like when they finally kiss and she's like really intense about it and he's like, you're gonna kill me.
Right.
It's like,
You'll be
come
the
on.
death of me, Bella.
Yeah, and that's her getting upset when he says shit like that. And it's just like this weird, like hot and cold. They would be like that couple at school that you know is going to be together for a really long time, but they're super fucking annoying and they always have some drama. And they're always fighting, but they're always in.
Yeah. And a lot of those first couple chapters is setting up the kind of high school drama. Like you have to learn all the different kids and they're all into Bella. And
Who
then
don't
you have,
matter, by the way.
yeah,
Who don't matter at all in any part of the story.
really, yeah, don't come. And I haven't read the other books. I don't know if they start to matter. My guess is they don't. Considering how kind of carelessly Jacob is scattered throughout this book and how important he becomes eventually. Like I haven't even read or seen any of those movies. I just know like this the general idea. It is kind of like, man, you really didn't utilize Jacob to set up that kind of, and I get that you.
I was
you know,
surprised that didn't happen in this book.
well,
That there was
same.
not like
Yeah.
a Jacob,
like the
a
tension.
big Jacob like tension in this book.
Well, that's a good point because as I was reading this, I kept projecting the tension from what I knew of the story between Edward
me
and
too.
Jacob. Instead, because it's, and I think the movie did that a lot better, where like they kind of showed you this setup and they kind of cut out a lot of the fat. And I think that's just amateur writing. Like that's one of the reasons that this was hard to read for me, and at times, like Sophie said, hard to read for even people that enjoyed it. Like because this was done by such an amateur, you can see the flaws that aren't so bad. You can forgive them a little bit if you like pop fantasy young adult stuff, but it's like they're bad. It's
And
objectively
then, like,
bad.
how would
writing.
you describe Bella as a character from the book alone?
That's interesting. That was one of my questions.
Because there are a lot of conflicting things, which isn't to say people can't have very, traits that are sort of in conflict. But
I noticed that right around like page 40. I was like, Bella is a little inconsistent as a character.
Yeah.
Kind of, especially they make her less inconsistent in the movie, which is why I keep saying the movie is better done, because they had a professional writer write that, so that's why it works better. But it was like it's a little bit inconsistent. And I get she's a teenager, so she's like kind of at the end of her teen years where you're kind of growing up into an adult. But there was this kind of inconsistency between her being an immature teen that doesn't understand her feelings exactly, to being like a mom in her 30s, like cooking dinner and going to the grocery store and
to
all
being
this
like a total, like,
housewife for her dad.
no, sort of like femme fatale, like who is like being really manipulative, like especially when she's like with Jacob and she's like bad flirting. And it is really bad, but it seems so unrealistic for even bad flirting that it's just corny.
Well, I mean, in the real world, if you're like let's just say if you're a woman that's more attractive than the average woman, you're usually bad at flirting because you don't have to be good at flirting.
And it's just like, it's also all of these things like she's not like other girl,
Yeah.
but she also has to be a character that's like, I guess, easy to relate to for most girls. But yeah, there's all this shit of like she's not like other girls, but like she's very clumsy.
The clumsy
The thing
thing.
that stands out to her about Edward is in part that she has a floral smell.
Right.
Like, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't get and I didn't really buy her as a character.
Yeah, the making her clumsy I thought was a little over the top, but again, this is kind of an amateur, like she says
And
herself.
she's also a teenager, and
Yeah, and that happens when you're growing into your body and stuff like that too, right? Like you maybe like when you're in that puberty stage and your legs get longer and you have to learn how to use them and all that kind of shit. Like you can't do all that. But yeah, I did think she was a little inconsistent as a character. And then I tried to avoid just kind of tearing this book apart in terms of the structural and grammatical and the superfluous commas from somebody who clearly doesn't know how to use commas in in a sentence. So I didn't want to like really beat it up that bad with that, even though I could, because I mean that's easy. It's easy to be like, "Whoa, this is terrible structure. This is this stupid but it started to really get on my nerves at some point.
yeah, it didn't bother me.
Yeah. We've covered that a few lines, but the preface.
The way she talks, like he's always growling something, like the way that she uses the verbs to follow any bit of dialogue. Someone's eyes are always narrowing. He said his eyes narrowing. He said snickering. It's all, he groaned.
Yeah.
Like those are all her favorites.
That and like the preface is always, I got a very much like Snow White and the Huntsman vibes, like fairy tale vibes, and I get that's what it's going for, right? The forbidden fruit, this kind of thing. Very first line, and this is the first voiceover in the movie too. I'd never given much thought to how I would die.
Yeah.
Oh God. I mean, I get that the genre. This is something that like is common in the genre, but yeah, that first couple little paragraphs here where she's talking about the hunter smiled, I was like, ooh. And then the sentences started to drive me nuts, but yeah, don't have to get too much into that. Few moments, the ellipses really drove me crazy too. How they were used.
I just flew through it. I wasn't even like paying attention. I just needed to know what happened next.
And it's
even
very
though I knew.
teen. Like
It's so teen.
Yeah. Like the very first line of chapter 2 on page 29, the next day was better. Ellipses. And worse.
Yeah.
I'm a teen.
It's
And I'm a
like,
teen in
it's obnoxious.
2003.
Yeah, it's obnoxious. But it's also like exactly. I don't know. It's, yeah, there's a 17-year-old girl in me. That's just like, oh yeah.
And
I guess I could just read this against like, and against my will to not like it, knowing it's bad.
yeah,
And I still need to read the next one.
there was some serious lines. The big line that I stopped marking them at a certain point, like the cheesy,
Yeah.
horrible metaphors
Oh,
and
the
lines.
cheesy ones are really bad.
But
There's so many.
by page 30, I was still kind of like, well, let's mark it. And on page 30, there's this one where she's referring to her courage. I made the cowardly lion look like the Terminator.
Oh my God, yeah.
Cowardly lion capped, Terminator is not.
Oh God.
Yeah, dude. I don't know who edited this, but they sucked.
Yeah, also that line's just like, ugh.
Yeah, the line makes you want to puke,
It's also teenager.
but it also sums up what this is. Like this
It's
is
just teenager flirt porn.
that, but I think, we have a book podcast. We talk about all kinds of books on this thing. Like we know where, like I think a lot of people, like especially like in like the literary side, they tend to try and treat these kind of young adult pop novels on the same par that you would with any type of literary attempt at a novel. And we don't want, I that annoys me on its own way, because we got to be careful to avoid that and treat them separately, kind of thing. But yeah, it really just kind of, the pop culture references, like this is a genre. There's a genre that maybe Twilight started, although not really. It kind of always was there, but like it really took off after the Twilight stuff, right? And Harry Potter and all that. But it's like there is this like tween thing that would think that like the Cowardly Lion and Terminator references were very cool. I'm thinking of like Ready Player One and all
Very
these
pop.
stupid.
I mean, it's just pop culture references
Well,
to
that's what
things
I
that
mean.
you already know.
And like the pop culture is like in place of actual metaphorical or some type of language or anything like that. That you just throw this pop culture, and I like that. I think that has a place in a lot of literature and pop literature. But it would just, when you lay it on too thick, it very much puts you right into that kind of tween. And it is mostly tween girls that read this stuff, right? And adults, like 30-year-old adults like us.
It makes me anxious to be away from you. It's one of my favorite lines. And that one has 2 ellipses in it.
Yeah,
so
dude.
it makes me anxious to be away from you.
Yeah.
Ah, he groaned quietly. This is wrong. I couldn't understand his response. What did I say? Don't you see, Bella? It's one thing for me to make myself miserable, but a wholly other thing for you to be so involved. He turned his anguished eyes to the road, his words flowing almost too fast for me to understand. I don't want to hear that you feel that way. His voice was low but urgent. His words cut me. It's wrong. It's not safe. I'm dangerous. Bella, please grasp that.
Yeah, man. As I'm going through that, page 43 was when I pretty much stopped marking the commas after this, because I was so many of the superfluous kind of, you don't need that comma at all. I don't know why it's there. Which is class didn't start for a few minutes, comma, and the room buzzed with conversation.
Well, that's technically grammatically correct.
It's grammatically correct, but it's also just kind of like it's not that. It's just like class didn't start for a few minutes and the room buzzed with conversation. Like the comma doesn't need to be there. Like,
yeah,
it's
it doesn't.
doing anything.
But it's not incorrect.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's arguable.
This is wrong.
Not that it's wrong. It's just a sign
I'm
of like
dangerous.
Yeah.
It's because she's not dangerous, dude.
Yeah. And when I first started noticing that I was really bored was like chapter 8.
Give me a page.
I'm trying to find it myself because I didn't write it down here. Hold on. Chapter 8 starts on page 152 in my version. The Port Angeles chapter.
Yeah. Same as mine.
And that was like when I got there, and the reason I started feeling kind of like irritated.
This is where I have one of my notes at the top of the page, and I instantly remembered why I was pissed off when I got into this chapter. Go on.
It was just like, at this point, we're 150 pages into the novel. So that's what I mean. Like, this is my kind of cutoff for most novels. I'll give everything 150 pages, and if it's not getting me by then, I'll probably stop reading it. So at this point, I was like, all right, I'm reaching my first initial... I'll stop reading it if I wasn't doing a podcast on it. But that's where I was just like, man, nothing is at stake yet. I am 150 pages in, so I'm like a third of the way through this novel, and nothing is at stake. Like, what is at stake here? Nothing.
Yeah. So at the end of the chapter right before this, I wrote, what was the point of this chapter? To build up to the Port Angeles chapter? Because I sort of like had some memory of what was going to happen.
Right.
And that like something even minor like was going to happen. And I was like looking at it, I was like, oh, she reads. And like the whole build up to this chapter is like basically references to Bella reading Jane Austen novels and to having her plans initially canceled. And I was like, what? I was like, wait, what? Like, what was the purpose of it? Then, yeah, on the first page of chapter 8, I was already kind of frustrated when we got there. And she says, it had been a while since I had a girls' night out, and the estrogen rush was invigorating. And I was like, when was the last time, like, when have you ever had a girls' night out? I don't get any sense that you're like a girls' night out kind of bitch.
The estrogen
or
rush.
that like the estrogen rush is a thing for you. Like, and the thing that I wrote here was like, does she actually like these girls? Like, are we supposed to believe that she likes these people? Because up until now in the book, like the people that she's hanging out with, I don't get the sense she actually enjoys. Which is not like untrue to life, right?
Yeah, I was
like,
gonna say it's very female.
Like,
yeah, it's a very female friendship. There's I like you, but I kind of don't. Like, yeah, I mean,
I like you, but mostly I hang out with you because I don't want to hang out at home, and I like to talk shit about you later.
Right, yeah. So that's very normal, and like it's one of those things that's like, it is a normal kind of...
But she's not like other girls.
Like, it is a normal, real thing. But sometimes, like, this is why I kind of take issue when people say honesty when we're talking about books. Obviously, we're talking about fucking Twilight, so it's not, oh, it's an honest, humanity, some capturing humanity, yeah. But it's like, when we say that, so it's like some honest things just don't do well in novels. Like, I don't want honest dialogue because honest dialogue's fucking boring. Like, I want...
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem with this, is that it's like real... It's kind of trying to be like actual real teens having an awkward conversation together, figuring out how to flirt.
Without having built a full character.
Without having built the character, but it's also like, that's boring. Like, teens awkwardly trying to flirt is not exciting. Like, that's why you dress up dialogue when you're fiction.
For a teenage... For teenage me, it was plenty exciting.
So that's the thing too.
It's adequately exciting.
I never read this.
It plays on all of these like desperate, like insecure things. Even in this chapter, when they're talking about like Bella's life in Arizona, and one of her friends asks her like, "Didn't you ever go out with like a boyfriend or something when you lived in Arizona?" And she was like, I've never had a boyfriend or even anything close. Like, I didn't go out much. Which then again brings me back to the first moment of this chapter when we're like, it's been a while since I had an estrogen rush. Like, they just sound like...
Just saying that out loud.
They just sound like voices that belong to different people.
Just saying that out loud, like, it's been a while since I've had an estrogen rush.
Well, that's why you picture it as something almost like sarcastically said, know? It's been a while since I had an estrogen rush. But, like, it doesn't even read that way, really. She says it was invigorating. Like, and I don't buy her as an ultimately sarcastic. Like, it wants to be both things. And so do teenagers, and that
Right.
makes sense. But like, we have to be able to buy into it, and I don't buy into it.
Yeah.
Like,
That
it's just, it doesn't read the same. Like, there's a missing connecting piece.
and I didn't read this when it was coming out and big because again, like I already said, I was a teenage boy at the time this came out, so I was very much like fuck Twilight, that's lame, trying to be
Maybe it's
cool.
that we don't get her like like her interior life is just not that complicated.
Yeah, which is true for a lot of teens, but it's like also like but I am nostalgic for Harry Potter, which is something we'll get into on this pod. We plan to eventually, listeners, do Harry Potter the stuff way we're doing Twilight here, but it's like I texted Sophie about this during the week as we were reading it. Like I kept at that point, chapter 8, and I'm like, there's nothing at stake so far, and we've had 150 pages
Oh
of
my
novel.
God.
I was like, Potter, like, say what you will about the young adult genre, say what you will about the millennials and their fantasies with like obsession with these IPs. It's like, all right, at least Harry Potter had something at stake from page 1. Like page 1, they're dropping off a strange baby at a strange house by these unusually strange people that can turn the fucking lights out at will. And we're just like, hold on, what, and that starts it. Like here, what do we start with? We start with I'd never given much thought to how I would die. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's not the same. They're not even on the same level. That's why Harry
Well,
Potter is a
but that's
billion-dollar
the only
empire
thing
with
that's
theme
ever
parks.
at stake. It's Bella might die, and it's never that we think that like Edward is the problem, even though he's like, I'm the danger, and in some way, he is putting her to some degree in the way of danger.
Right.
But like, can we, come on, like, takes two, okay. And also, it's just the only thing. It's the only thing that happens. Like is that like it's the ultimate like weird savior fantasy where she needs constant saving, and she's like, I don't want to need to be saved. But that's the only thing that happens throughout this whole thing. Whenever action is happening, it's because Bella is a damsel in distress.
Yeah. There's that.
And it's never because Edward is about to eat her.
Yeah.
At none of those points are we ever like
It's
like when
always,
they're making out, we're not like, oh my God, is he gonna rip her throat out?
like I said, you feel it more. We're talking about True Blood. I've never read the books, but I've watched that series and actually rewatched it over the pandemic with my wife. We both rewatched it. We were like, oh yeah. And really that show falls apart after the 3rd season, but it's still like, really it falls apart right away. But it's, Snooki in that, we get a more sense of her being in danger for like being attracted to vampires and shit than we do of Bella here. And I guess the True Blood novels were written way before these kind of thing. But yeah, it's just, you don't have that because like I just use that because it's the only thing I could think of for like vampire women, vulnerable young women fucking hot vampires or wanting to. It's the only reference I have. So I'm thinking, yeah, Snooki, like the danger was real. Like you could see it. Like
yeah,
she
she's also
felt...
an adult.
Yeah, that helps that you're
helps.
a young adult. Yeah, instead of a teen.
There's also more sex, which also helps.
Yeah, that helps a lot. All right, those 3 chapters where it's nothing but Bella and Edward talking really drove me crazy.
Yeah, there's so much. So we're talking about the chapter now. This is the chapter where she's getting stalked by like these creepy dudes.
Yeah, like just these guys that like are harassing her on the street and I guess attempting to rape her, according to Edward. They're
so
catcalling.
Edward just shows up in another town where Bella happens to be that weekend.
Right. And that's the thing, is because this is right after we establish that Edward is a vampire. Like, we just established that, like, a chapter or so ago. And then, once we establish that, it's like, okay, We just established that the reader knows, Bella knows, Edward knows, everybody that needs to know knows, and we know this. So now we have this little secret that we all have. Then we get about 100 pages, listeners, 100 pages of Edward and Bella talking awkwardly like teenagers trying to flirt at a restaurant, in their bedroom, in Bella's bedroom, at Edward's fucking house. Like it's just them talking. And I was just like, oh my God, like we need to move. Like we don't need all this talking. But then I guess Sophie was saying, like, the most of the suspense in this story is whether or not they are going to like kiss.
Yeah.
And I guess that just doesn't do it for me. So I was just getting so frustrated. Like I was like, "There's no
there
fucking."
are also like all of these other sort of, I think, really basic like teenage girl fantasy moments of like just getting saved, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a big one of being asked out to prom in really weird ways.
God.
Yeah, there's a lot of there. Yeah, there's just a lot of. Oh, he's watching me, but I'm not bothered by that because he wants to keep me safe and he actually just really admires me. Like, this is all just the mind of an insecure female. Like, this is all exactly that to a T, just as a romance novel.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with that. I've never read a romance novel. Like, this is the
Neither
first.
have I.
Yeah,
Well,
this is the
except
first
for
one I
this.
have. Yeah. So I don't really know. Yeah, and I really don't know the genre. So because of that,
But I was also a teenager and I didn't want to it wasn't the same, like it wouldn't be the same thing to read about people fucking.
Right. Yeah.
It would
Although.
be very exciting for the flirt.
Yeah, my big thing when it was curse words, and then anything graphic or violent like that would usually be like, ooh. I always tell the story of when I first saw like the word damn or shit in like a book and how tingly it made me. I was in like 4th or 5th grade, and I remember it was in one of those, you remember those My Name is America books? No. That they pushed them on young boys. I guess girls had like American Doll or American Girl. The boys had the version of that called like the My Name is America thing, where they were like these diaries of different young men in history. So like there was one,
we
I
had
remember
the like diary. Well, we had, I don't know if they were like diaries or if they were always like, they had those like gilded pages.
Right. Yeah.
Shit. Yeah.
And they were written, at least the My Name is America stuff written, and they had a bunch of different experiences. So you got to experience like, not experiences, but different perspectives. So there was one I remember very distinctly about like a Japanese American boy that was put into one of the Japanese camps during World War II here in America, and like that was invigorating. But the one I really remember was a World War II one, where this like 16-year-old boy was in World War II, and he kept talking about like his nuts shriveling up for being scared and like saying damn and hell and shit. And I was like, oh, and I was like 10 years old reading this book being like, oh my God, this is so badass. Like, yeah. So that was my first memory of that shit. And then, by high school time, dude, I was pretty deep into like Chuck Palahniuk and all that kind of shit at the time. 2007, 2006, Kurt Vonnegut, I was just discovering that kind of shit and like loving it. All the typical things that people make fun of men for online. I was into it, and I was unapologetically into it. Still apologetically into it. So, yeah. But yeah, there's that. So that's really my thing. And I want to talk to Sophie about this too. We talked about like the male, female a little bit. How like, not that like it's different, but just how we got like different perspectives. Like the associations that women make for things to sex versus the associations that I would make or an average man would make towards sex.
All right, just hear me out.
Yeah,
hear me
go
out.
for it. Speak on it, yeah.
I was stunned by the unexpected electricity that flowed through me, amazed that it was possible to be more aware of him than I already was. A crazy impulse to reach over and touch him, to stroke his perfect cock just once in the darkness, nearly overwhelmed me. Now, the actual word there is face.
But your brain immediately went to cock?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though and now I say that now as an adult, my teenage brain would not have done that. But this is like, when you think about how much face touching there is in this book, like it is really weird. It is like a really weird like fantasy of somebody who has never been in a romantic relationship.
Right.
It's just like every moment is designed to be like peak romantic, you know? It's never, it's very rarely just like playful. And when it's playful, it's like he's strongly carrying her with one arm or something, where it's very clear that like she is not his equal.
Yeah, he's about to manhandle her.
Yeah.
Throw her down on the
There's
bed.
so much face touching, like all of these moments that are like either supposed to be either playful or romantic, like always feel overdone, but completely out of the brain of somebody who has never.
Yeah, because because that association, so like when you replace the word face with the word cock, like that sounds like a regular kind of romance novel. Like that sounds like
Yeah.
the type of romance novel you'd pick up at an airport.
Exactly,
Like,
but teens only care about touching, like teen girls are like, no, I want to stroke your face in the
yeah,
dark,
and there is something intimate about like
cry
face.
on your chest.
There
Have you
is,
tell me that you still love me?
and there is something sensual about like face touching, hair touching. Those are two things that are always a little sensual, no matter how you put them into anything. Because it is just, you have to be very close to someone to do that. You have to have that trust, unless there's some type of violent reaction. If somebody's like touching your face when you don't want them to, you usually have to be close and vulnerable and all that kind of shit for them to touch your hair or face type thing. So I understand that aspect. But yeah, as like an adult reading, as like a 30-year-old adult reading this, it's just kind of like,
Stroke his perfect cock just once in the dark. Nearly overwhelmed.
quivering member,
Yeah, dude.
oiled by the female's juices.
Like I just outlined this whole page and just wrote sex in the margins like 4 times. The hour seemed very long. I couldn't concentrate on the movie. I didn't even know what subject it was on. I tried unsuccessfully to relax, but the electric current that seemed to be originating from somewhere in his body never slackened. Like everything sounds like a boner.
Oh yeah.
Occasionally, I would permit myself a quick glance in his direction, but he never seemed to relax either. The overpowering craving to touch him also refused to fade, and I crushed my fist safely against my ribs until my fingers were aching with the effort. I breathed a sigh of relief when this is all happening in class, I believe, by the way. I breathed a sigh of relief when Mr. Banner flicked the lights back on at the end of class and stretched my arms out in front of me, flexing my stiff fingers. Edward chuckled beside me. Well, that was interesting, he murmured. That's just like, you know, I assume about 40 minutes of them sitting next to each other. Which, like, does, I guess, describe that. Like,
That, and I'm trying to be
like
fair.
a fairly realistic way, but also, I mean, I just wrote sex all over this.
Yeah, that's what I say it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm trying to be fair too. So I'm like, all right, you know, I put myself in a teenage brain. And it is fucking hard for me to do for a lot of things because, you know,
Yeah, if you put yourself there and like think about like sitting next to somebody that you were like really into.
crushing on in class. Yeah, there's like that internal anxiety or nervousness when like the hot girl or guy sits next to you for your bio lab and you're like, oh, yeah, kind of thing, right? If Kristen Stewart came and sat next to me, I'd be like, oh, yeah, yeah, pretty girl, yeah, whatever you want. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. The Carlisle chapter. The Carlisle, the Cullen family history chapter.
Cullen family history chapter fucking sucks.
Yeah, I think that's chapter 16.
That's when I found the audiobook online
So
too.
that chapter 16, that's page 334. So this is after we had a lot of talking, of just kind of talking, and like Sophie read this kind of awkward teen interaction at school and at home, and all, you know, all the different type of activities you do
before or
as a teen.
after she's like, wow, that's a big Jeep you got there.
That's before, because the Jeep is right before the baseball. But like what was I gonna say? No, the Carlisle chapter is right after the chapter where they go to Edward's house and he introduces her to like all his vampire family, and they kind of all know that she knows that they're vampires, and like they're kind of like trying to be human and like welcoming to humans, and they're kind of awkward about it. But then we get like, Edward takes her upstairs to Carlisle's office and starts giving her like the rundown of how Carlisle became a vampire, how old he is. And I just thought that chapter was good because it wasn't like good, but I was like, okay, here we go. Let's get something. All right. Giving the reader the backstory, the history, the kind of lore, because, every time there's a vampire novel like this, sure, we have like the traditional vampire lore. And there's some reference to that when Bella's using her internet connection in like 2003 or whatever, her like hot pink translucent Mac or whatever on her desk that she's searching vampire lore online with a dial-up connection.
Yeah.
Did bring me back a little bit. Yeah, that did bring me back to the days of AIM and shit. But I was like, okay, this is good. Like, you got to give the lore, and they all kind of take a few liberties with that.
It takes so long before we get any sense of, and these are our enemies, and that doesn't even matter to this book.
One of the big liberties that she took with this book, and I think it's not terrible, but it's also kind of like a little bit cheating. The vampires can come out during the day.
Yeah.
And I get that she kind of covers that up with like...
There's a lot of cheating. They can also go out in the daylight. They just sparkle.
They sparkle. They don't burn up and die. Yeah, like in most vampire lore.
There are very limited ways to kill them.
Yeah. They don't even talk about stakes through the heart in this. They talk about tearing them to pieces and burning them. Any of that stuff, silver, garlic, crosses, there's no reference to any of that. Maybe there are in later books, but at least not in this first one. So, okay, whatever. Every kind of book kind of puts their own twist on the vampire lore. That's fine. So I was willing to forgive that too, right? Okay, but like give us the lore. Like give us the rules of the universe, This is what I was kind of dying for that at that point. Because, dude, at this point, we're 334 pages into this novel.
Yeah, by the way, just for reference, they declare their love for each other, or at least Bella declares her love for Edward, at least to the reader, on page like 195.
Yeah, and
they declare their love for each other like the first time they hang out.
Yeah, and my thing with the Carlisle story was I was like, okay, this would be a good opportunity to lay down how all this came to be, or at least give us like the rules that Carlisle puts forth for all the vampires, how they survive, maybe how they hunt together as a family, because they supposedly just feed off of animals and not humans. All that kind of stuff. Like, you could lay all that down, and it just didn't happen. There were a few decent little bits of, fictional lore where Carlisle came from and like kind of the 1600s in Europe, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and some of those moments are fun, but the part where Edward's just taking Bella around Carlisle's office and around the house, I thought was kind of... Well, this is also when she just... Maybe I'm sort of blending two chapters together. This is also like right after
they are a little blended.
Yeah, she also just met the whole family.
Because that chapter and then the chapter... and then the chapter with Carlisle, they're right after one another, and they're both take place in the same scene. So they're both in the Cullen house. One's in Carlisle's office, and then one's kind of downstairs. And then, but that chapter on Carlisle, there's like a couple pages of giving us a little bit of lore and history and cool little like, oh, these people are so old, look at how old he's been around, look at how old this painting is. And then it just kind of devolves into Edward playing the piano for Bella, and Bella being kind of swooned by it, and then them not fucking. But then we get the first kiss after that. But that whole Carlisle chapter, I was just like, man, this was such a missed opportunity. Like, you could have really driven this home, given us a little bit of history about the werewolves in the area. And I get, if you're writing a big series like this, she probably wasn't aware of the fact that she was going to have this werewolf battle by the time she finished this book, right? As of somebody who's a writer, trying to be a writer at least, like, I'm sure you don't know that's going to happen by the, that you're going to go this direction while you're finishing these, series of 4 very lengthy books. She probably didn't even know there were going to be 4 books at this point when she finished this one. So you can, just to be fair about it. But goddamn, like, you could have done something. Like, you could have set up this some way. Like, I just thought it was a missed opportunity. And again, just to like a showing that, yeah, she's an amateur. There's a reason that she didn't publish anything before this, and again, hasn't really published anything since.
No, the first time they kiss is on page 282.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn it, so I missed that.
And then they just sort of don't stop kissing. And that's, of course, naturally very exciting for the reader. But by this point, it's like you get that, and then you're like, okay, well, that's that.
We don't even get them kissing, though. I guess that's why I missed it.
He hesitates for a long time, and then his cold marble lips pressed very softly against mine. What neither of us was prepared for was my response. Blood boiled under my skin, burned my lips. My breath came in a wild gasp. My fingers knotted in his hair,
Okay,
clutching
yeah,
him
right.
to me.
Okay, so that came 50 pages before. Yeah.
Yeah, so they've made out, but he was like, what? I can't. I'm dangerous.
All right, and then let's get to this stupid-ass baseball game.
Okay, yeah, that's a big deal moment. Vampire baseball, the thing that makes it all happen.
Oh my god, dude, I was watching the movie last night, and when this scene started, I was just like, oh man, this scene was
It
gay.
has to be bad to see. It has to be bad to see because the way it's explained is like they're vampires, but they move super fast. So like you can barely see them, and they're playing baseball. Like,
Yeah. I was like,
And-
this scene was super gay in the book.
there's also just no way for that to, like, I can't imagine a scenario in which that looks really cool
Yeah, and it was
unless you're having a bunch of games happening at once.
and it was very gay in the movie. It was I was trying to think of a better word, dude, but that really kind of sums
It's
it
like,
up.
this whole family, like, they just like go out and play
Yeah.
baseball.
It was like,
vampire baseball.
oh, this is so Mormon. So like, we're
They do
vegetarian
it with
vampires.
this one, they don't do it all the time, but they do it this one time when this human's here.
That and the reason I forgave it a little bit is because that's the first time we get that real sense of something's at stake. And the movie does this better. So the movie puts these kind of strange killings happening around the town of Forks throughout.
Yeah, that's better.
Right. And then you meet the vampires that are doing it at the baseball scene, which is the same thing that happens in the book, except you don't get those killings throughout.
Yeah, you don't get stories of killings.
And it makes her father a more significant character too, because Bella's father's the chief of police in this small town. So then
Yeah.
he's telling her like, hey, there's a strange animal like attacking people going around the town. Be safe. He keeps saying that. Like, it makes him less of a empty shell too, kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's just kind of this, struggling single dad trying to take care of his teenage daughter, but not really knowing how. But he obviously loves her and cares for her, but doesn't know how to do it, kind of thing. And like, it just makes him a more significant player in the movie. And that's what I mean. So when you get a real writer, I wrote down who wrote the movie. Sorry, Melissa Rosenberg wrote the screenplay adaptation for the movie, and yeah, she probably saw right away like, okay, we need to have a central pull through here. Like, we need to have something that pulls through from the beginning to the end. And it works much better that way when you set it
So
up
it's
like
not
that.
the first hour is them talking, and then the last half hour is things happening.
Is this new? The villain is finally introduced in the last 100 pages. Of
Yeah.
this.
It's like the last. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. The villain is finally introduced in the game chapter,
And I get
that's-
annoyed after this. I get annoyed after this moment, but also, can we say that this is also like some of the first conversations of substance that Bella has with, Edward's family. And one of the things that happens is like his, sort of vampire mommy, like walks up to Bella because they're both, just watching the game. They're not playing. And Esme's like, I killed myself because I lost my child. That's why I killed myself.
I jumped
And that's
off a
basically
cliff.
their conversation.
Yeah.
my baby died, you know? Like, that's just
So I
how it
jumped off a
starts.
cliff. You're the Empire, honey. Call that
Yes.
ball and strike. By the way, I killed myself.
It's like, oh man.
I killed myself, and then Carlisle wouldn't let me die.
Yeah.
Took it upon himself to make me live forever with that pain of my dead child. Yeah, that is funny. I didn't think of it at the time, but when you brought that up,
I
I was
mean,
like,
it was
yeah.
so insane. It was just like you meet your boyfriend's mother, and she's like, I had a baby once. That baby died, and then I killed myself.
And now I live forever.
Or even like, and then I tried to kill myself. Like, you would freak the fuck
Yeah.
out.
Oh, nice to meet you.
You'd be very uncomfortable for the entire remainder. And how would you bring that
Adema.
up? The thing is, like, Bella already knows this, but she doesn't know that, like, she hears that, Esme,
She's
which is a
French too,
terrible name.
right? She's supposed to be French, right? She
That's
speaks
not
a little.
clear to
It's
me.
not clear at all, but in the movie they have her speak some French and stuff. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, they make her. So she's supposed to be
Tells
super
her that she
old.
falls from a cliff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, when that happens, you're instantly like, yeah, okay,
Right.
she fell.
Yeah. But that was the first instance where I was like, okay, we finally have something at stake, but the problem is there's only 100 pages left in the novel. So, like, this is the first time we get that Bella's in serious danger to the point where, like, everybody's in danger
Not because
now.
of Edward. Kind of because of Edward, but not directly because of Edward.
Because Edward stepped in front of her and bared his teeth to this other vampire that wanted her.
Yeah, which it's clearly like is not something that would have made a difference, and also the only way that we should care if Edward is dangerous is because he might rip her throat out, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, while they're fucking.
Yeah,
Just
that's
take a
the thing
bite
that
and rip. Yeah.
Yeah, so those three vampires show up. One of them is like really into the hunting challenge. So when Edward defended Bella, he was like, I gotta get that. And then they come up with some urgent, elaborate plan to get out of Forks and confuse and ultimately kill this other vampire. The whole family's involved. Whole family, everyone is like, we're gonna protect this bitch. We've been living for hundreds of years this way, but we're gonna fly across the country and we're gonna do a whole runaround here. And that's just like, whatever, okay, fine.
Carlisle.
Then the unforgivable thing happens.
What's the unforgivable?
So we get all the drama where she's like, they're running from this vampire. Bella sneaks away because the vampire calls her and is like, I have your mom. And she believes that and she goes. And we get basically Bella getting fucked up by this vampire. He's just sort of beating her up, not in any way that feels particularly graphic, even by a teen standards. In fact, where does that happen?
Yeah. It happens when they're like, and he has that camera. So I think there is something kind of sexual about it. Like that kind of, he has this young girl and he's kind of torturing her and filming it and loving it kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of sadistic side of sexuality that I guess is hinted at there, but not explicitly expressed because, again, this is like a kid's book, right? Like,
No, I croaked. No, Edward, don't. And then something smashed into my face, throwing me back into the broken mirrors. Over the pain of my leg, I felt the sharp rip across my scalp where the glass cut into it. And then the warm wetness began to spread through my hair with alarming speed. I could feel it soaking the shoulder of my shirt, hear it dripping on the wood below. The smell of it twisted my stomach. So, like, he's beating her up. She's, like, about to pass out, but for some reason, she has a hopeful moment, and we sort of get the sense that, like, she's about to be rescued. We get to the next chapter, and she's just being saved. And it's not like she's watching, Edward and this vampire duke it out. she's just, they're running toward her. Oh no, Bella, no. That's what Edward says. Oh no, Bella, no. She keeps referring to him as an angel because she's like dying.
Stephenie Meyer's a Mormon, so
And bad vampires nowhere to be seen.
yeah,
Bad guy's gone.
dude,
He's just beating her up, and then like for 2 seconds he's beating her up. He like talks at her for a while, then he hits her a couple of times, and then that's over. And then we're just like, she's being saved now. And I'm like, wait, hold on. I don't get to see vampires rip up this other vampire.
yeah.
That's the moment that I don't forgive in this book.
Well, honestly, dude, when you think about that scene, that entire scene is just like a long, drawn-out 100 pages. Like, if these vampires if these 7 verse 3 could easily overpower this guy, why didn't they do it right there in that field? Like,
yeah, and
why did they make it
this
this
guy
elaborate?
feels like he could have been like some kind of weird like serial killer vampire type. Like, where they could have been like setting something up.
Well, that's
as,
what I
like, the
mean. So there
backstory.
is this kind of like...
So like at least there would be more weight to what's happening with all of those, pages that we read where they're in high school and she's like building friendships with people that we don't care about. So at least like their classmate would die or something. Like, something that would hold a little more.
Well, we've talked about this in other books, more literary books, where you talked about suppression, like the kind of suppressed events in a lot of literary novels. This is suppressed in not like a technical kind of technique way. It's suppressed in a bad way. Like, we want to see the event.
Like, oh, we don't want to watch this person die, so we'll just not write that part in.
And this is where I think the Mormon
And
thing
it's just
matters.
like, what the fuck? Like, the whole point is that, like, you're so fucking dangerous. We're supposed to, like, believe from him being able to, like, run quickly and pick her up, like, that he's, like, super dangerous and he growls, But, like, I feel like as a reader, until I actually, like, see him harm something, I'm gonna have a hard time with it.
Yeah, I think that's where like the Mormon distinction becomes more important because like the fact that she's a Mormon, so we can't have premarital sex, we can't have
Could just be really lame.
violence, we can't have
And I say that as a fan. It as a fan. Love this book.
Yeah.
Hate it. Really enjoyed it.
I stopped taking notes after that, and I was just my final note
I
was
just kept writing where I saw sex happening and where I saw really optimal moments to like substitute boner for another.
quivering member.
Yeah. There's also just like, there's all this shit. I mean, there's like, a lot of people I think would criticize it for the same reason that any, I think, adult would criticize it, with like a female character who always needs to be saved, who's like clumsy and like she smells like flowers and she likes the bad boy and who doesn't seem bad at all. He's just like the hottest guy at school. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah, he actually seems like a really nice guy.
He's like a really nice guy who is only emotionally available to her.
Yeah. I didn't have many notes out of it, but I have a couple questions, and we talked about this a little bit. My question is, where does the tension exist in this novel? Like, relationship, violence, where would we say that the main tension exists? I know we talked a little bit about it, but...
Oh, it's just, one, when will they kiss?
Yeah, that's probably the main tension.
2, how long are they going to like each other this time before they like get into a stupid argument and then he goes, Bella, I'm dangerous, but hey, I love you, I'll stay with you. That of course becomes a cycle and we get very used to it.
And then of course Bella being coveted by all creatures that are fantastical and want to kill her but also bang her.
But also just regular dudes. She's also like really popular at school, but supposedly like a loner.
Right, but I mean like that's
seem like,
if I'm
not
trying
like
to pinpoint,
loner, but like she's not just like a popular girl. She's different. She's the hottest girl at school, but she's different.
Yeah. And I just mean, like, if I'm trying to pinpoint, like, where I would call the kind of, tension, drama, whatever you want to call it, the thing that's required of most stories for us to be interested in them. And I guess you're right. Like, most of it is, okay, will they kiss and will they be
And
together?
will they stay together? Yeah. Or
Because
is
it
he
is
gonna
like
like abandon her?
the thing that
That's the
my
whole thing.
mind goes to is the violence. So she's in danger is where my, kind of brain was like, okay, this is where the tension is. But I think you're right because it's so just 100 pages of tension, and with a 500-page book of like the
Yeah,
violent,
no.
she's gonna die.
His character makes all of the choices
Right.
for this plot. Like it doesn't feel like she's a character with real agency. She's sort of just like, except for like, I mean, she decides to go sneak away to try to save her mom, which is like, I guess, one moment where she's like, but even in that moment, she's like, well, I'm resigned to dying now because I know it's going to happen because I'm going to die. I'm going to go meet the vampire and I'm going to probably die.
Yeah.
And she's just like
Self-sacrifice.
it's very like, I'm just going to sacrifice myself and probably not even succeed in saving my mom. So why am I going? But throughout the whole thing, it's like, things only happen because Edward shows up that day and like insists that like she doesn't actually make anything happen.
Right. That leads me into my next question, but yeah, I would agree that like, and that's what I think is one of the big weaknesses is that since the main tension is just about whether or not they're going to kiss or be either, be boyfriend girlfriend.
Yeah, and I would say also it's fine that she like isn't the primary, like she's not the thing that moves, make something happen. Like things can happen to you and that can still be a good book. It's just
Well, there are endless debates about that. Yeah, if you have a passive main character, is the book less interesting?
not
Usually.
passive, just like it can be like the primary tension could be like some external force. Like,
Right.
it could be like something going on in nature. It could be like war.
But
And
yeah,
this character makes all their choices based on that. But
it just wasn't enough for me. And I think that was one of the main reasons I got so bored and frustrated reading this. And I mean, I'm not the target audience. Like, rapidly approaching middle age white male, I don't know if I'm the target audience for this. But it's like, that leads me to my next question. Is Bella a stereotype of like the kind of fragile female?
I mean, in a lot of ways, yes. Like, I think that's probably a lot of heat that this book probably got early on.
It was
The
kind of
kind of
before a
things.
time where people were beating you up over things like that, so it probably gets that now, but it
Yeah,
maybe
I
didn't in
mean, it probably still
2006.
had
Yeah,
something of a reputation for it.
yeah,
And it is, I mean, it is like, I think it could have done it, but I hate saying this because it sounds shitty. I feel like it could have done a better job of presenting that in a way that felt a little less scattered. Like, it didn't feel like there were so many things about this character that just felt like sort of random cliches about being a teenage girl. And
yeah.
that's fine.
And since
But
most
so many of
teenagers,
them were like, it was hard to picture like who she is at school, right? Because she's like different from other girls. She's like, described as like pale. Obviously, she's beautiful because like people look at her. And like we don't really understand the politics of her social circle and where that sits in the hierarchy because there is always a hierarchy. So she's like different. She's always being rescued. When she's with Edward, she's like really awkward and like sometimes pouty or sometimes just sort of girlish, which is also fine. Like she's a teenager. She doesn't fucking know what she's doing. It just didn't all tie in easily to me to one like believable single character.
yeah,
She felt like a different person in different moments.
for me, um,
I mean, and I didn't feel that way when I was reading it when I was, 17.
yeah, Bella was a
I think I just
frustrating.
picked the things that like fit for me, I think that's the point. I think you're like just supposed to be able to relate to her as a character.
And maybe it is because, yeah, it's like a teenage girl. It's going to be difficult for me to relate to a teenage girl, but it's still like, not that I couldn't do it because
Yeah,
there are
but
plenty
it's
of
not
books that have
focusing
forced.
on any of
Yeah.
those things. Even when she's
Right.
like, "Oh, and we talked about books, endless books," but
Yeah.
then the only references to books we get are like Jane Austen. Like, I don't even fucking want to read Jane Austen.
Yeah.
I didn't then either. That's why I was reading Twilight.
That, and it is, I mean, there is that kind of, there's that little kind of stereotype, and this is where it's a little inconsistent when we talked about Bella's character being inconsistent. Well, it's like because they want her to be this kind of bookworm stereotype, right? Like the nerdy girl that reads Jane Austen in high school and like goes to bookstores while her friends go to dress shops, like this kind of thing, right? But also like she's dumb as shit. Like she's kind of just like a dumbass bitch, like with this like.
I wouldn't even describe her as a dumbass bitch. It's just like she lacks sufficient depth to
Yeah.
be real. Like she's not complex enough to be somebody who is not actually the super bookish girl, but like wants to be seen that way.
And
Like
the
it's
thing
not
is,
written as the like this is who I am versus this is who I want to be and like want to put out there, which is I think maybe a distinction from the sort of smattering of characteristics we get.
that, and I think it's we forget that like most teenagers are stereotypes or cliches, right? Like they're so
Or trying to
young.
be.
Yeah, or they just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is this level of being a teen and you're kind of cliche and you don't really know what's original or what isn't. You're just kind of copying what you see, what you think you're supposed to be doing. So maybe that
You don't
is
know
like,
how cringy you are yet.
yeah, or how confused,
Yeah.
whatever, all that kind of stuff. So there is that level of, most teens, even though we like to think of ourselves that we weren't. I mean, we were huge cliches, right? I already talked about me being the kind of cliche as a teenager that was saying fuck Twilight because that's what little, I'm too cool for it type thing. Would definitely be a stereotype of a teen boy at that time. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's not very well written. It's pretty effective.
This, and I have another question here before I.
Yeah.
My other
Yeah.
things is the questions after this. I just have questions about like the movie, or if you want to talk about the movie. There was like, all right, so this is a sexless romance novel, mainly because Stephenie Meyer's a Mormon. So all right, that. But like, does being sexless hurt this novel?
No, I think for a romance series, it's saving it for later.
Okay. Do they have sex later in the series?
And also, it's declared at some point during this book that they're virgins.
Edward is?
They both are.
Yeah, Edward's been a virgin for 90 years. Yeah, okay.
Edward's been a virgin for 90 years.
Yeah. Which I guess maybe I should.
I assume vampires masturbate.
That's an interesting thing. I didn't write this down, but you just made me think about it. Yeah, okay, so how Edward's portrayed in here might be the most unrealistic. And I get he's a vampire or whatever, right? So it doesn't need to be realistic. But it is kind of like maybe he's like the kind of artificial fantasy.
They
of
both, yeah, he is like they both are, except one is
a
like
guy who's immortal and is deadly attractive to all women who see him, takes their breath
course.
away, is just a virgin for 90 years. That's what I mean. That's a
like-
fantasy. Yeah, like that's
every girl's fantasy.
a girl's fantasy.
A
Yeah, that's
virgin boy.
yeah, right. That's a Mormon girl's fantasy. Yeah, that is.
A virgin boy who's also a monster.
Yeah,
He can throw me around in bed, but he doesn't know it yet. He just doesn't know how.
yeah. So that's interesting. Maybe Edward is more of like the kind of
Of course he's. I
non-existent.
mean, yeah. I mean, he's just a stand-in for like any like super hot guy crush,
and
and it doesn't even have to be the super hot guy. It's just like you could totally, like they're all just, like we get no real sense of their like inner world in any impactful way.
yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, it's not even like we needed kind of typical romance, like dirty, quivering member descriptions or anything like that.
Well, it's not like we never get shit from Edward's perspective. Not that you have to.
Right. It is
We
all
never,
told from Bella's perspective for the most part, yeah.
yeah.
And we don't know what's happening apart from what Bella knows. So I guess she's the narrator and the
And she, yeah, is just sort of, it's not like she has interesting ideas about what's happening, you know?
well, that's what I mean, yeah.
She doesn't seem, she would, aside from like not wanting to go to a dance,
Because that's a cool trait.
yeah,
Screw prom.
yeah.
Very cool.
And being like depressed and pale. Like there's nothing about her that's like, she is interesting, you know?
Yeah. She's
But she's
smart as
not
shit.
like other girls.
Yeah.
Edward can't read her mind, so she's not like other girls. And all the guys like her.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I guess not that it. I mean, I guess it wouldn't have really improved this novel. We've already pointed out so many of like kind of structural flaws in things, but
And she's, I guess, sort of unreliable too, because I think all of that's supposed to build up this idea that, like, you know, she doesn't see herself clearly.
right.
You know, like the big line that I feel like I think they put in the movie. Right. You don't see yourself very clearly, do you?
And I guess we're never gonna get that kind of stuff. And like, not that it needs it, but
It's all just it's all just teenager fantasy.
yeah, that's what I mean.
And
Because
that's what this book thrives on, and it'll like that's why it did thrive. Like, and yeah, you can like have these characters that don't have sex for a while because you're like selling it to 15 and 16-year-olds who, like, I guess at least when I was in high school, or maybe like not everyone's fucking. It's not just
Right.
like assumed that everyone's fucking.
well, because people aren't, even though I guess that's the time when people
So
are
like
ripe to
there's
lie
this
about
build
it.
up to them being like, you know, they're not of age yet, or she's not.
Well, they're unmarried, so the Mormon Church would not
I
condone.
but the
I mean, dude, even kissing before marriage would be risque. In
the next book does start with her 18th birthday.
okay. Yeah, and I mean, you know, like I said, we don't need to have these kind of graphic 50 Shades of Grey style
No.
scenes for this book.
And I don't think that's like what would have made me read it. That's
Right,
not
yeah.
why I read it. Like that's what I
Yeah.
mean. I don't think sex would have made this more successful for its
Right.
target audience. I think it's like,
Good editor
you
would
know,
have, but
me, like awkward, low self-esteem, had some fantasy of being cool, but like could never quite reach it. You
Right.
know?
and I guess if you did put any more
Just
sex,
wants to be told that like you're important and special.
and I guess if you did put any more sex into this, you would be like,
You're pretty and you're smart. I'll never leave you.
well, it would be like,
Book.
it would be an adult romance novel.
God, I feel like we have to do an adult romance novel though. What were you saying?
I just like, you know, if they would put more sex in there, then it would
Yeah,
just
it would be marketed to a different audience who
Right.
would know
it would
that,
be like a Danielle Steele book. Yeah, it would.
and then
be-
you'd be like, wow, this 200 pages of talking is really wearing me the fuck out.
And then I just have like movie shit. I guess you didn't even watch the movie.
No, but talk movie to me. I want to know.
Well, I would say that overall the movie was better than the novel, just because they had a competent writer write the script, I would imagine. But
Yeah, I feel like I have to watch it tonight and
and
find out.
as we kind of went through, you know, because we went through pointing out how the novel is flawed, and then not just in terms of it being a young adult novel, but how it's flawed in terms of the writer's skill, in terms of the plotting, how events unfold kind of, you know, very shakily and don't really make sense as much as you would think type stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of voiceover use, which is usually a sign of a weak movie, but whatever, you know, for doing a novel adaptation, sometimes that's a good little fix for things when you need to get a lot of information to them without showing them.
The problem with that here is that I'm assuming the voiceover is Bella.
Yeah, it's Bella, and Kristen Stewart reads it.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest problem with that is that her character is not interesting. But the fact that it's shoved into an hour and 15, an hour and 30, I would assume, makes it maybe
It's
easier.
just over 2 hours, I think, is the
Oof.
movie. Which,
Whoa.
when you have big novel adaptations, they usually hit the 2-3 hour mark
Yeah.
if you're including enough. But yeah, it's funny. I just watched I took my wife to see the latest Fantastic Beasts because, again, my wife and I are millennials, so we're huge Harry Potter stans, and we
Oh,
were
fuck
just
yeah.
yeah.
Who isn't?
And I noticed that too is because Rowling writes all those scripts, right? She's the sole writer for all those projects. She writes them like novels, and that's the problem with a lot of the Fantastic Beasts movies is that they're written as if they were novels. So like, there's an ending, and then there's 20 minutes of like what you would see in the ending chapter of a novel, particularly a J.K. Rowling novel. So the kind of like happy ending, everything's kind of explained, and then we see this scene that we don't really need, but you could have it in a novel, but in a movie, you know. Anyway, there's like, you know, and there's just almost too much going on, overcomplicated, which you can get away with in a novel, you can't get away with in a movie. So I'd say things like that. So whatever, you know, like I said, I
Yeah.
wrote down I keep forgetting who wrote. Melissa Rosenberg wrote this script, so she clearly knew what she was doing in terms of adapting a novel. I'm sure she made a fuckload of money off of writing this script. But the thing the movie does better, they introduce Billy and Jacob right away. Like they right away, they're showing up to Bella's house and being introduced and like talking, and she's like, "Oh, hi, Jacob. I remember you. Blah 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 from when I was a kid." Like that happens right away, and that's so much better, so much more efficient. Like that we know that Jacob built the truck for her, that he kind of has a crush on her because she's the prettiest girl in town, all that kind of stuff. And then I just noticed like some of like Bella's emo outfits, like Kristen Stewart in these kind of 2008 era
Yeah.
emo
Oh yeah. Oh my
flannel,
God.
and like
I bet the jeans are really fucking bad.
the jeans aren't so bad, although they do have those kind of
That's just 'cause
decorated.
she's hot.
They
It
do have
doesn't
those
matter because she's hot.
that, and they do have those kind of like decorated
They
pockets.
flared. They flared jeans.
They're not flared, but they're kind of like those bedazzled pockets that were big.
That's very bad, but if
Right
they're not
before-
flared, they're not so bad.
It was like right before the Ed Hardy era.
Is that,
But at one point she was wearing
is that
like
like right when skinny jeans were hot?
yeah, they were pretty tight, all the jeans. It was like when we were getting to skinny jeans, but it's like they had at one point they had her wearing like this like baggy bowling shirt like kind of thing over her. And I was just like, oof, that's so 2008 emo, but like I get it. Like it was very hip at the time to like be a hot girl. And then
You gotta scroll through this.
what is it? What did you send me?
This is apparently what Stephenie Meyer's dream cast would have been
What did
for
she
the
say?
movie. I mean, the choice for Bella would have been really bad.
What did she say? Who?
Some bitch I don't know.
What's the name?
Emily Browning.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
Here, I'll show you. But it's definitely like, I mean, it was it's a bad choice.
Ugh. Yeah, it is a bad choice.
I mean, this is much better.
Yeah. God, Kristen Stewart is so much hotter than that other. Like, that's the shirt. That's the green bowling shirt. That the picture you just showed me. Yeah, yeah. Of like Bella wearing this weird like dad bowling shirt over her like thermal. I was like, oh yeah, this is bringing me back to high school, dude. Real hard. And then the other thing the movie did good, like really well, was they cut out the kind of bullshit, inconsistent Bella's a homemaker mother figure. They cut that out, and they just have her and her
Like trying
dad.
to, you know,
Yeah,
like save her dad from loneliness.
right. Or save her dad from like a lack of a female in his life or whatever. And then I already talked about the added vampire attacks. Those are fucking great. Makes the dad more involved as chief of police instead of just being this kind of empty shell that he is in the
Yeah,
books.
that would have
like-
been great. That would have been really good in the book.
And he's just like an empty shell in the books. Like he's just like, oh, Bella, honey, you okay? I don't know. And then he just kind of appears and disappears as needed.
Yeah.
Everything happens a lot
Solely as
faster.
like a father figure and not as a cop in any way. Like they don't really make much use of that at all.
And they make it easier to understand too. So like everything starts moving a lot faster because it's a movie and they need to smash it down. But like I always said when we were reading this, I was like, look, the book actually starts in chapter 3 when Edward saves her from being hit by that car, And then we get to see
Yep.
this scene where it's like, okay, something's unusual about this guy. Like, that should have been in the very first chapter, but of course it wasn't in the book. But they moved that to be like kind of the first day of school in the movie, which it should have been in the novel too. But of course, you know, they had a bad editor and a bad writer.
They definitely didn't need to spend as long making us aware that he was avoiding her. Like,
And yeah,
I don't think that needed multiple. I don't think that needed like a whole chapter.
and they make it a little bit more obvious that Edward's very into her. Like when they tell us in the book that he's been in her room for the last couple months or whatever. Like she, the way they do that visually, it's easier to do that visually anyway.
Yeah.
But like,
What you see?
they just kind of flash to him standing there, and then he disappears, and she's like, "Wait a minute, did I just see him? Did I dream him?" That works better than it did in the book. They cut out the superfluous dance in the movie, so it's just one dance, the prom, not these two dances that aren't related
Yeah.
to each other at all and don't matter at
Dude.
all. Like the prom was
I
not a
know.
thing. Like the prom wasn't a thing until the epilogue. Like they just don't mention the prom. Like the prom is mentioned
We
by
also
a couple
didn't
people.
need the epilogue.
Yeah, we didn't need the epilogue. It could have just been the last chapter. But, you know, again, these type of young adult fantasy books, they like to do that. That's the formula, right? The epilogue is the formula. The last chapter is always called an epilogue,
And
whether
then
it does anything or not.
That's where we introduce Jacob as like, he's grown. He's still kind of awkward, but he's tall now. He's a
Yeah.
tall boy now.
Speaking of terrible lines, they do have a lot of lines that are like in the book that come back when they're talking to each other. The line that I couldn't stand in the book, and they put this in the movie: "You're my own personal brand of heroin."
Oh, God, yeah.
It is such a bad line. It is such a bad line, and it's in the novel. They put it in the movie,
Well, and
I
it
bet
was her line in the book. You said it like it was his line.
it was his line in the movie.
Yeah. In the book, it's like,
Okay.
so you're saying I'm like
Heroin.
your brand of heroin. Which also, yeah, it's just weird. Like her voice just didn't feel like, it just felt a little underdeveloped as a person. But like, again, it
Yeah.
didn't matter to me at all. It's like when I was, you know, in the target audience. But it's not like it is not, you know, great.
My own personal brand of heroin.
My own personal brand. Like that's a thing too. Like you don't even think about it as you're reading it. Like you're just like flying through to see if they're gonna make out. What happens?
Yeah.
Does he like her?
That was like, you know, one of the many cheesy lines, but I was like, ooh, I guess, you know, when you think
There
about
were a
it,
lot of really cheesy lines.
when you think about it, it does fit the period a little bit.
Yeah.
The heroin chic, we were just kind of after that part in the early 2000s, you know, the kind of Kate Moss modeling and shit like that, right? Like the heroin chic look. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The kind of like super way too thin,
Yeah.
very sloppily applied, too much eye
Yep.
makeup, and then like
Oh yeah.
very, very flowy kind of satiny black dresses and all that. Like,
Yeah, that was so
everybody
hot.
just looks like a drug addict, like walking around. The heroin chic. But yeah, I was like, all
They
right.
didn't say in the movie it makes me anxious to be away from you.
I couldn't remember that exact line because I don't remember that one. You know, that one's bad, but it's not as cheesy. But the thing I noticed about the movie was, dude, in the first 36 minutes, they've crammed like almost the first 300 pages into the movie. Like, that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah,
the first
'cause-
300 of
yeah.
the pages of the novel are almost completely irrelevant apart from a few character building things. Like, so I was like, yeah. So, like, Melissa Rosenberg, you know, got this, like, assignment or a job to, you know, adapt this script. And at the time, the novel was big, but it hadn't become the phenomenon that it was yet. Like, supposedly from what I looked up, the movie was, like, held up in, like, production for 3 years until the Harry Potter movies started rolling out. And then, like, the young adult fantasy market started to blow up, right? And we just started making all of the trilogies of, like, young adult shit. So, like, there was that. And I was just like, yeah, like, this is just so... It just shows how much filler is in the novel, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, for all the time we spend with Bella at school, very little happens there.
Yeah.
That's why I think it would have been Like, yeah, it would have been so much better if there was more. I don't know. Like, I do think it could have been interesting to give us Edward's perspective.
And for a minute, I thought they were going to cut out the baseball part in the movie, and I was kind of hoping that they would change that. Because, like, the way they set up the, the evil vampires chasing down people and killing them, they set that up very early in the movie, as we already mentioned. And it's like, okay, you have a couple killings happening around town. Everyone's like, oh, it's a strange animal. We don't know. But, like, Edward and his family know it's a vampire. We didn't have to have this terrible baseball scene. Like, I want to see how many shots they had in the movie of Alice on the pitcher's mound doing an exaggerated, like, pitcher's movement.
Yeah.
And like we saw that same fucking clip like cut back to like 10 times in that scene, and then this had like these stupid kind of. I also think it's hard to show on camera, but True Blood did this too, where it's always bad, where they showed like the vampire speed.
Yeah.
It's hard to show that without looking terrible.
Goofy.
Yeah, it's a little cartoony.
Yeah.
But yeah. And it's just so bad. Like I said, it was terrible in the book. It was terrible in the movie. Fucking gay as shit, dude. Like, it was bad.
Yeah. It was the stuff that was the hardest for me to get through in the book, I imagine would be minimized sort of in the movie, or at least maybe seem less bad visually than it does in writing. Like every time he's sort of white knighting her.
Yeah, well, at one point in the movie, like when they have that like kind of 100 pages of talking at various different places after he saves her from being kind of attacked by those men in Port Angeles.
Yeah.
They kind of speed that up to 15 seconds where it's just like a montage of them changing positions in the room talking. And you kind of...
That's great.
But it works better in the movie because it's like, yeah, when you're first dating someone, you will stay up all night and talk to them type thing if you like each other. That's a thing that happens, especially amongst teens. We don't need to see that entire conversation for 100 pages. Definitely. So you can do that in 15 seconds with a little bit of like montage of them talking all night, and you see the sun rising up in the background. Okay, that's enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, the problem with that in the book is that more would have had to have happened.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's filler.
There would still need to be more book.
Yeah. But that's when I started thinking, I was watching that, I was like, yeah, Kristen Stewart, I think the casting was pretty good for that movie. The vampire family, I thought, could have been cast a little better, but they also like are all shells of characters apart from Alice.
Stephenie Meyer wanted John C. Reilly to play Charlie Swan, Bella's dad.
That would have worked out. He could have done all right. Again, that's not much of a character, so it would kind of be a waste of John C. Reilly.
It would be a waste.
Yeah. But I bet if he was looking for a payday, that movie made a lot of money, so he could have taken it if he wanted.
Yeah. Also, just so much of this movie happens exclusively through like Bella and Edward. And
yeah, I mean, the whole thing does, yeah. So
it's very limited. It feels very limited in scope.
Yeah. It is.
Like, there's no other story happening except for them liking each other.
Yeah, it is.
And I guess that's why we liked it. Makes sense.
I didn't like it. I liked the movie way better. And it's not I even loved the movie.
17-year-olds.
Yeah. Right.
That's why 17-year-olds liked it.
And so my last question was movie or book better. My opinion, the movie's better, but you have to rewatch the movie. Yeah.
I would have to read.
We'll revisit that when we do the second book in the series.
But I would imagine that if I was like watching the movie coming off of having just read it, I would be like, oh, that happened so fast. Like, it would feel too short, or it would feel like they cut out all of this. It would feel like they cut out most of the book, which I guess they do.
They do, but again, most of the book can be cut out. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. The pacing is much better in the movie. Like it moves, as a good movie should, because it's a different format. You want to have that pacing much more important, but like it's paced much better. Cause like I said, Melissa Rosenberg cuts out all the fat like she should have. for writing an adaptation like this, and she did a great job with it. I think as good as you could get with that kind of hollow shell of a fat 500-page book. I mean, as a writer, what are you going to do with that? You could kind of only improve it if you do it right, if you know how to adapt the novel. So,
but no one was actually reading this for action. They were reading it for like flirtation,
well, that's the difference.
romance story.
Yeah, like the male-female interpretation, whereas like, yeah, well, like that's not enough for me when I'm reading a book. Although that's not always true, right? Because I love Edith Wharton and her stuff isn't so much action-filled as it is.
Yeah, but her characters have depth.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like, it's not so much just I need action. I need more than what I was given in this book, period. I guess I say action, but yeah. Interesting shit, man. I mean, I don't know how they did this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, it's, again, like, there were so many cringe moments, but it was so, like, I cannot deny how easy it was for me to read and fly through it and be like, yeah. There are moments that I was, like, distinguishing between, like, what was bad hot in the book and what was good hot. It did also add an extra element of fun for me to be looking for places where I could insert the word dick. So it was also like an activity.
Yeah. A little Mad Libs, dude.
Yeah.
I remember in like elementary school and shit, like when we had like library days, some days like we would just do like Mad Libs or something.
Oh yeah.
And that was just like a thing we did in elementary school in the library.
A lot of Mad Libs in elementary
but I mean,
school.
And I mean like the teachers would like
yeah.
would like walk us through it. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is library day. Oh yeah.
I don't think we did that on library days, but it was an activity we did.
Yeah. Fun facts about the movie. I guess the movie was only made for like 37 million, which is I guess a large budget in today's standards, but back then it was more moderate. And it made like over $407 million at the box office gross. So that's what I mean. So I know Melissa Rosenberg, I bet, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, like these guys were all set up for life after.
How many poor boys were dragged to this movie?
I bet quite a few, dude. Men will do almost anything to get the woman to touch their dick, as you said. Yeah, they'll do whatever it takes, dude. Sit through.
I didn't have that perspective as a 17-year-old.
Right. It's funny. I remember when I was like in college, some guy had like this shelf full of like, and we were, it was stupid. We were drinking or whatever in college, and I was in this guy's room, and like, I had just met him. I was staying at his house because like my buddy knew him or whatever. And we were traveling to New Orleans at the time. And I was like, all right, we're staying at this guy's house in Baton Rouge. He had a whole shelf full of like Nicholas Sparks books. And, I was like 20, 21 at the time. So I immediately went to the dumb reaction of like, huh, you're reading these books? Like, huh, what a loser. And then he was just looked at me and was like, hey man, you do what you got to do for oral. And I just started laughing. Like, I was like, yeah, dude, like his girlfriend has made him read all these books for like a blowjob payment.
Damn.
A down payment or whatever. That's how it works. Yeah. Yeah. Fun fact.
It's intense.
I mean, it's intense, but it's not even, dude. It's just, that's normal, right? Like, isn't that like... That's what's interesting too, right? Like, because this is touching on something where it's like, okay, confused adolescents, confused teens, but it's at that point where women especially, right, like start understanding the kind of power they have over men. And that can go a couple different ways, right? Like that can go like horribly destructive if you use that in a certain way because you don't understand like the longer term things. Or it could go like the other way where you're almost too passive and like don't afraid to use it type thing.
Yeah.
Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Like the kind of like men will bend to my will if I like offer sex or some type of sex appeal. But also if you do that too much, it's going to backfire type thing. Like it's not...
Right, but not like I don't think all women feel that, and I definitely don't think all women feel that at 17.
Well, so I mean, you're just starting to kind of get the idea.
You have the idea of it, and you hope.
Well, like
that it works.
Right. Yeah.
But without any promise.
we're
Because
like
you have no idea what sexy is. Or at
that.
least if you're awkward, you have no idea what sexy is.
Well,
Or how to like make yourself look presentable.
yeah,
Or like you know, or you're like titless or whatever. That's
right.
fine.
Or you
Totally
just
cool.
got them,
Titless.
or your tits just came in and
Kind
you
of
don't know what to do, and you're yeah, and all of a sudden all the boys are talking to you every day and being nice to you, and you don't understand why, like Bella, like
Or you're ugly and they're not.
yeah,
Regardless of your tip,
yeah, yeah. There's
right?
that.
So there's also that.
Yeah, there's that.
It doesn't usually, it doesn't always work for those people at 17.
Right. But that's why I found interesting when you kept saying that, like, yeah, this could be like, this is sex, this is a reference to sex, and I just kept thinking about that all week. Like, yeah, what makes one person's
He
brain?
raised his hand, hesitant, conflict raging in his boner, and then swiftly brushed the length of my cheekbone with his fingertips.
With the head of it, yeah. Crushed the length of my cheekbone with the shaft as he was slapping it against. Yeah, he slapped it against my face. No, it was but yeah, like what makes people associate that? Because I was not associating with that. It's just like the different triggers.
I think any time they were having like an intimate moment, it was so. It felt. Maybe it was because like it, reading it again, it as like an adult with more perspective, it seemed so manufactured that it felt really hard for me not to, because if I put myself into that character's position now, I cringe.
Right.
Like, ugh.
And that's just maturity, right? Like, I mean, we do that every time we look back kind of on our teenage selves or a depiction of that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine discomfort.
I think that's it, dude. I mean, I have nothing else to say of this boring fucking book that was...
I think I'm just saying I don't fully know why I felt the need to write boner and dick in there. But in those intimate moments, I did. There's... You can't write the word stroke in an intimate moment. Stroke his blank. You think what? Not like cheek.
Right. It's like Family Feud, right? When they give you like this like blanks and somebody says something crazy or like, and like Steve Harvey makes that face.
Yeah.
With the big eyes, he'll be like,
Exactly.
and like look at the camera. I will say that is one of the best things Steve Harvey does is like his face, like his reaction to somebody saying something and his pan to the camera like after that is one of the funniest bits he does. Like he just like and like looks at the camera with that face. and like, that's the best thing Kenan Thompson does too on SNL when he does his Steve Harvey and he does like that exaggeration of it.
I just imagine Keenan now when you say Steve Harvey.
Well, because he does, that's like his best impression. Like that's like the
That's
only
also
one that's
just
good.
the most
Yeah.
of Steve Harvey that I see.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I have Hulu, and whenever I have Hulu, like, and my wife and I watch like a few kind of like dumb TV shows that like air on like ABC or whatever that you can get through Hulu and stuff. And every time we're done with like one of those, so like if I like, they either try to play The Bachelor after, like autoplay, like force us to watch The Bachelor, or they start autoplaying like Family Feud, like or like Celebrity Family Feud with like Steve Harvey or something. Like every single time, if we leave it right after the credits roll for like 5 minutes, then it just starts forcing us to watch these fucking.
I love The Bachelor for like the first several episodes.
I've never
When
actually
there's still a
watched
ton
it.
of bitches and they're all being awful. It's great.
Yeah, I've never really watched it, but I know people. I mean, it's a
We've
popular
only watched
show.
like a couple seasons and I think we fell off both times. Like we stopped watching.
Right. Yeah. It eventually it gets too fake. Like
It's
a lot
hard
of
to stay invested in because I don't actually care.
that too, and like the big one that we watch all the time is 90 Day Fiance, and that's getting to a point where like like you can tell which ones are fake and not, like which relationships were put together by producers and like which ones are like kind of real.
Yeah.
But then you find out that all these people met each other off of like sugar baby websites and like sex, like roulette chat rooms and shit, you know, like this cam girl shit type thing. That's literally every fucking couple on that show, dude. Like, it's literally just like these sex tourists like finding these poor like third world girls, like, giving them money, and they're like, "Oh, how did you meet?" It always starts with them meeting on like some cam girl website or something, and like, this guy getting obsessed with her.
Ugh, man.
And he pulls an Edward and wants to be her hero, dude.
Ugh. But they look like Big Ed.
Yeah, exactly, dude. That guy. How do you think he met that girl? Yeah, dude. Yeah, you know, they were doing a little cam chat, dude, where he's paying those coins and like the.
And he leaned down to press his cold lips once more to my throat.
Yeah.
It's Big Ed.
That's one thing I noticed too, dude. Like, not to, like, you know,
Big Ed kissing your neck.
And I've never read those True Blood novels, but like the thing that True Blood.
Neither have I. They're much shorter though.
But the thing that True Blood did really well was like make the biting sexy. Like, it made the like biting during sex like hot. You know what I mean? Like Eric Northman biting some girl's neck while they're banging naked.
Yeah, it also didn't. Biting didn't mean that you turned into a vampire.
Right, yeah. It
show.
meant that like they just drank some of your blood. But that does mean that
in this book.
Right, yeah.
Which, did we remember when Edward sucks the venom out of her wound?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fun.
I mean, that's the climax.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
And we don't even see the bad guy die, but he supposedly does.
That's why I was thinking of that scene, dude, that where like Edward's over her and she's like turning into a vampire because the poison's going through her veins, and Carlisle's putting that tourniquet on her like broken leg, and Edward's sitting there, and Robert Pattinson, he's like, Carlisle, and, like right before he like puts his mouth on like on her wound to suck it out, because he's like stressing about how he won't be able to stop, and Carlisle's giving him directions, and he's like waiting, he's like, Carlisle, he's like, it's up to you, Edward, make the decision.
Oh my God.
And then he starts sucking on her wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah, suck that wrist, Edward. Bitch, suck that shit.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So that's Twilight.
That's enough. Twilight. Although it did make me think of that Parks and Rec episode with Will Forte. You remember that, where he's like chains himself to the Parks and Rec department because he wants to put Twilight in the time capsule for his daughter or whatever.
Yep.
And he keeps like pulling out copies of Twilight, giving them to people. He's like, "So you ever read it? It's good."
Oh my God.
Yeah, dude. Quality. All right, that's it. Nothing else on this. Fuck Bella. We didn't even get into Team Edward, Team Jacob, dude. I guess that's later novels, because Jacob's
we'll get into it in book 2, man.
Because Jacob isn't even a fucking character, like a real character in this one. Yeah. All right. Reminders to listeners. This podcast is available on all platforms. We have a Patreon where you like to see full uncensored episodes. Patreon.com/heavyboard. Check that out if you want to see some of our cool locked episodes. Check out our YouTube channels for more. We have pretty much all of our free stuff up there, as well as clips. Links to all the books in the description and stuff. And next week we are doing... we're going back into High-Minded Theory, dude. Theory of the Lyric by Jonathan Culler. I almost said Cullen. Theory of the Lyric. I've never read that. That's going to be interesting. Fucking Theory of the Lyric. One final thing. We keep forgetting to mention it. Like, we're looking for workshop horror stories. Send those in to us at heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. If you had any type of horrific event in a workshop of some kind, we want to know. I'd like to get that started. That would be a fun segment that we'll put up there.
Yeah, or if you witnessed one.
I mean, usually if you've been in workshops for a long enough period of time, you've experienced it, dude. I mean, you've experienced it pretty hard. So yeah, send in some workshop horror stories to heavyboardpodcast@gmail.com. We want to get that started. That's it. Subscribe. This has been Heavy Board.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say Mayo is entirely hostile. No! In it.
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.